Thank you, Chair. Thank you for appearing tonight. I've only got two short questions. There seems to still be an abundance of public servants, agencies and departments making submissions outlining explicit support for net zero policies. We visited this before, but I'm still unclear as to how that meets the public service standard of impartiality. Shouldn't those submissions not endorse government policy and only talk about the mechanics of implementing it?
I think it's also the obligation, Senator, of public servants to implement government policy. And I'd be reading from what you're saying around that characterisation that the public servants are implementing government policy, and they're talking about how to go about that implementation.
Well, that's my point there. There are two things. They're endorsing policies, and I can accept that they can discuss the mechanics of implementation, as I said, but not the endorsement of policy.
Well, I just don't have. I'd have to really see the material in front of me to make any comment on that. And essentially, Senator, it is their responsibility to explain that.
So I'll just go to the second question. I'm just interested in when a submission might specifically say, for example, quote, "This department supports the implementation of net zero." Net zero is a government policy. That's unquote. Net zero is a government policy, so I'm struggling still to understand how supporting or opposing a particular government policy meets the standards of impartiality.
I think you really need to ask that to them, Senator. Just from when the familiarity with sort of cabinet documents is that it may be that they're talking about a particular implementation path and they can see that implementation path as being feasible and practical, and they're saying, yes, we can do that. And the term that officials may use in that is to say, I support that because we can do that.
Well,
rather than they necessarily agree.
I can see some merit in what you're saying, but as I said, I'm just interested in when a submission might specifically say, quote, "This department supports the implementation of net zero." Basically saying they support net zero, the whole department.
Senator, it's hard to tell in the abstract without seeing the context for what you're quoting from, but I do wonder if they meant support in the sense of deploying resources, expertise, personnel to implement the government of the day's policy. Because when we talk about implementation, as Dr de Brouwer said, sometimes we, in a public service setting, we use the word support to talk about the deployment of personnel, expertise and resources. Okay.
But you still agree that public servants should not express their opinion about a policy, just the implementation of it?
The job, Senator, of public servants is to both implement the policies of the government of the day, and also we have a role in explaining the policies of the government of the day as well.
Thank you for correcting.
We do have guidance that we issue at the Australian Public Service Commission, Senator, and we have guidance that steps out how those judgments ought to be made about when it is appropriate for public servants to comment, how public servants might comment, and how the code of conduct and the values that are set out in the Public Service Act apply in different circumstances. It is something that is difficult to comment on in the abstract because it's a judgment on a case-by-case basis, is what our guidance says, taking into account a range of factors that we recommend people apply. That draws on High Court case law, for example.
I don't intend to take it to High Court.
Sure. These principles have been considered and we've incorporated that into our guidance.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair.